Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesdays, real talk with a realtor. I'm Rayce Rollins, also known as the agent lady. And yes, we're going to do the drum roll. Do it with me. Come on, Rayce. I have Rayce Rollins, and he knows the most about real estate, taxes, teaching students. Hold on. What else I got?
Bookkeeping,
accounting, and everything in between.
I don't know the most. I know a couple of things that I share with you guys today.
Absolutely. And today we're going to talk about SellerBacked financing. So, Rayce, why would a seller want to do SellerBacked financing? And maybe, what is SellerBacked financing?
So essentially, SellerBacked financing is when the seller of the property actually takes the first mortgage or first lien position and becomes like the bank. So when you go buy a property, traditionally you would get some qualified paperwork, and then you would go buy a house. And that house you would put down 20%, and then the 80% would be financed by a bank, and then you would pay the bank back over 15 or 30 years. But imagine if instead of the bank holding that 80% note, the seller actually does it. So that is seller-backed financing, just in general. Now, why would a seller absolutely do that? So a seller would do that for 3 reasons that we're going to talk to you about today. The first one is, let's say that the seller really wants to sell that property to a buyer that they know, love, and trust, like a family member, for example. But they know that that family member does not have the financing or the credit score to qualify for that mortgage loan. What the seller could do is say, listen, I'm going to sell you this house, right? But I'm going to retain the house as a bank, and then you pay me a monthly payment, just like you would a bank. So that's one reason.
And then you have a certain interest rate and all that stuff that you would charge them to hold the mortgage.
Exactly.
Because so you are the bank.
Exactly. You are the bank. And if you look at that amortization schedule, the amount of money that you're paying back to a bank over 30 years will ultimately be a lot of money. So that's the second reason why.
Maximum returns.
Maximum return. So if you buy a house for $100,000 at 5% interest rate amortized over 30 years, you might be paying $170,000 for that house. So if I'm a seller, I would want to sell a house for $100,000, but hold the mortgage and get $70,000 in interest payments over the course of 30 years. That doesn't seem like a bad deal. So you maximize the return through seller-backed financing.
Right, and they don't technically have to keep it the whole 30 years either.
Very smart, yeah.
So I think you had a similar situation, right?
Yeah, so I got my first house. I was 18 years old on Temple's campus, and my aunt actually gave me seller-backed financing. She bought the house in cash and then sold the house to me, and she retained the mortgage. I sort of went out on college campus, got 4. I was living with 4 girls at the time.
Girls.
I was living in the basement. I was collecting $500 per room, so that's about $2,000 in rental income, and I was paying my aunt $800.
Wow. And
that's how that was my first opportunity. Now, as an 18-year-old college student, I would not have been able to pull that deal off. So thank you, Aunt Sherry.
Right.
Yeah. Now, how she structured the deal, she didn't want to hold the mortgage for me for 30 years. She said, Rayce, I'm going to hold this for you for 5 years. But by the time you're 23, you either have to be able to qualify for your mortgage through refinancing, or you have to come out with a way to pay me all of the rest of the money.
So it's a balloon payment at the end of 5 years. So you either pay her cash.
Exactly.
Or get refinanced.
Or get refinanced from another bank.
Right.
And that's exactly what I did.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
High fives.
Thanks.
Come on, that was a low 5.
High five.
Yeah. Up high. And then that leads us to the last thing about capital gains.
All right, so what are capital gains? Capital gains are basically what you're going to pay on the gain of an investment. So if I own a property, right, that I live in the United States, and I sell that property, let's say that property of my primary residence is $100,000, and I sell that property for $200,000, you don't pay any capital gains because that's the house that I live in, and that's an exclusion. So you don't pay any capital gains on houses that you live in, up to $250,000 for single people, and up to $500,000 for married couples, right? But that does not apply to investment properties.
Right.
So if I own a duplex for $100,000 and I sell that duplex for $150,000, I have to pay capital gains tax on that $50,000 appreciation.
Right.
Now, that's going to be assessed all at one time, But if I use seller-backed financing, obviously I am selling the property to a buyer that I know, love, and trust, and they're paying me back over time. So I'm not going to get hit with that big capital gains tax bill, about 15-20% on that $50K. I get to spread that out and pay it over time. So that's a huge benefit. So just to recap, the reasons why somebody would do seller-backed financing,
Right.
Number one is if you know, love, and trust the buyer, right? Number two is if you want to maximize the return, because basically you're taking the position of the bank and you're getting not only the sales price, but
Right.
you're also getting the interest.
Interest
And
is nice.
and interest is how the rich stay richer, right?
Right.
And then the last thing is spreading out, deferring the taxes on the capital gain, because you're only paying as the income stream from your buyer is coming in.
Who sets this up?
Who sets this up? Now, this is very, very important. I am not an attorney, and neither is our good friend, the agent lady right here. So you don't want your attorney or your agent setting up your seller-backed
Oh,
financing.
you do want your
agreement.
attorney, rather.
Oh, you don't want your agent. You
Right.
want your attorney to
Yes,
do it, right?
yes.
So it's a document, pretty standard. Some call it lease purchasing agreements, or it can actually be a sale where you actually transfer the property into the name of the new buyer, and then a lien is filed on the house.
Yes.
So that person can't sell it. They would have to go through closing and all of that. But you want an attorney to prepare all this documentation for you.
Absolutely.
Another thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the seller has a will, right?
Yep.
Because they basically they're the bank, but they're not an institution. They're a person of flesh and blood that can die at any time. And then no one's going to know about this agreement if it's not structured and recorded down at City Hall. So you want to have a copy of that will with an executor, so you know who to call, and maybe even have some insurance. So those are the three things that one would need to have. A contract prepared by an attorney,
Right.
which spells out all the details of what happens if payments get missed.
Right.
You want to have it filed at the City Hall so that the seller can't just change their mind after
Right.
3 years of payments. They can't just take the house back from you if you miss a payment, right?
Right.
If you miss one payment, they would have to put the property through sheriff's sale and go through the same processes
foreclosure.
that a bank would do with foreclosure.
Okay.
You want to have a will, because if that person who is holding the seller-backed financing for you has some misfortune and dies, you don't want everything to be left in rigmarole and somebody the person that's getting that inherited that property might say, yeah, my aunt never signed anything like that, or the seller never signed anything like that, but you want a copy of an executed will. And last thing, you might want to have some insurance on that person because you have a vested interest that they...
What do you mean insurance on the house? Of course you have insurance on the house, but what do you mean insurance?
So life insurance, just get some like a policy or
and you
some
can
sort
take
of
out a life
policy.
insurance on somebody else that...
Generally, if you have a vested interest in that person's...
That's interesting. We might have to talk about that next time, guys.
Yeah, I have to talk.
Well, thank you so much for coming
You're welcome.
and being on our show today. I guess if somebody wanted to find you to potentially do QuickBooks and or file their taxes and or talk more about seller-backed financing, how do they find you?
How do they find me? So they find me at my email is Rayce, that's RAYCE at financialgps.co.
And we're going to have that at the end, so you don't have to remember all of that. Well, thanks again.
You're welcome.
And remember, guys, friends don't let friends buy or sell real estate without the agent lady. Make it a great day.